everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for those people who have their natal Venus in conjunction with Neptune. Venus rules two signs, Taurus through the second house, which is money, possessions, and your sense of self-worth, and the seventh house, which is the house of committed partnership, under the sign of Libra. And then when we talk about Neptune, we're talking about the ruling Pisces and the 12th house, which is mystical. It's about the spiritual dimensions. It's about past lives. So it's really about, beyond space and time, you could say. And so there's like the sense of unreality. And so Neptune is associated with fantasy and illusion and sometimes deception, addiction, self-destructive patterns. So the 12th house can be that, but it can also be this sense of a spiritual, what would you call it, ecstasy or, connection with the spiritual, or, like kind of merging with God, merging with the universe. And so when Venus is in conjunction with Neptune, the love that you have for another person can be otherworldly. It's not like in this carnal kind of a way, like maybe Venus in Taurus, for instance, which is an earth sign. So the person can be rather idealistic in terms of how they conduct themselves in relationships. But all of this, I want to kind of get to in more detailed ways. I'm just kind of giving an overview. I want to give a shout out to cafeastrology.com. When I do these types of videos, I consult a website. It's not always the same one. It's one that I feel most comfortable with, that I really am aligning myself or feel that it's resonating with me, what they're saying. So I don't just take anything, just the first hit that I get. And the reason I do this, I could create this video without looking at anything, but I might miss some things. And it also helps me to organize my ideas. And I want to consult with someone that might be considered an expert, because even though I have been doing readings now for 8 years, I still am learning, and I'm not like somebody who just considers myself this complete expert. There are so many facets to astrology, and sometimes you're really well-versed in one particular area, and you may be kind of like still gaining information in other areas. So it's all good. But I'm definitely putting it in my own words, and therefore don't assume that Cafe Astrology is saying it in the same way. Actually, I've started this video multiple times, and I found, or I said something in one of the videos that was not on here because they did not choose to mention it, but I do think that it is valid. So it works both ways. So if you know anything about astrology, you may know that these two planets are very romantic. And so this combination will certainly produce that. And conjunctions are aspects that don't automatically have a label of a cooperative angle, like a trine or a sextile, for instance, or something that's challenging, like a square or opposition. You could say in some cases the aspect is neutral, meaning that it really doesn't have a positive or negative charge in and of itself. It's kind of like a wash. But sometimes it tilts one way or another. And I would say that because Neptune is involved in this conjunction, that could definitely be the case of the challenging variety, but not like, oh, totally that way. But I actually recently read something that when it comes to Neptune, and I don't know if they were specifically talking about a planet. I don't know what I was looking at. It might have been the moon in Neptune. It might have been Venus, but maybe it's everything, where they said that even the positive aspects can be challenging. And the reason for this is that incredible idealism that Neptune brings to the table. So it's wonderful to be idealistic, but when it comes to relationships, it can easily lead to somebody kind of glossing over another person's bad behavior. Neptune can be addiction, and so because it can be like, madness, addiction, general dysfunction, a person with this conjunction can have an attraction to people who are like that. And that can be problematic, obviously, if you keep getting involved in relationships that are dysfunctional. And you may not be doing it because you are a glutton for punishment. It just might be that you have compassion, because this combination does have compassion. And I think sometimes, because this is like having Venus in Pisces, it can be confusing love with, or was it, how would you say it? Pity with love, or love with pity? Yeah, I think pity with love. And so it can lead to a person who falls in love with the wrong person. Again, because Neptune is illusion, that can occur. And remember, this doesn't always have to be romantic relationships. This can be any relationship that you're in, because Venus can be, love itself, and how a person, or even, I think it can be social friendships and things like that. And so you're a very kindly person, and that creates a situation where if you attract to yourself somebody who is more of a taker, again, probably with a problematic personality that you may conveniently overlook, or I shouldn't say conveniently, but the reason I say conveniently is because I feel like sometimes people see things, but they choose not to really let it sink in. And so, for instance, if your sun sign is Pisces, or maybe if you have the moon in Pisces especially, this can be an example of that, where the person can fiercely love somebody who's seriously flawed. And they may have friends and family say, but he's doing this or she's doing that. And they're like, if you would attack anybody, and of course I'm talking about just read them the riot act, you would probably do it to the people who are trying to protect you, rather than the person who might be actually disrespecting you through their bad behavior. Like an example would be cheating. And if you are forgiving them on a continual basis, or as a continuous basis, you are choosing to put on those rose-colored glasses and not seeing what's really happening. There is the gullibility factor here that could occur, because again, like I said, this is like having Venus in Pisces, and the sign of Pisces is connected to something like that. In the tarot, the Page of Cups is connected to Pisces, and it can be gullible in love. And gullibility, it can simply be that a person chooses to see others as blameless. And that is a beautiful quality, actually, but it can be wildly unrealistic or delusional. And that's the problem. And it's like, if a person can limit, I don't really like the word limit, but limit their love in a more impersonal way to humanity, and maybe as a healer try to help people with their problems, that's one thing. But when you invite somebody into your inner sanctum, into that place that's close to you, that can be very problematic for you on a personal level. And it can, drag you down with them. I thought of that song that I really like by the Gin Blossoms, "I'll follow you down, but not that far." And yet, that's, the theme for Venus in conjunction with Neptune is "I'll follow you down." And there is no depth that I won't go, because there is that loyalty that is, you could say an undying loyalty. Being sacrificial, that is the hallmark of Pisces, because it is like that Christ consciousness and the idea of, Christ sacrificing for humanity. But the thing is that it can easily devolve into being the martyr who ends up messing up their life big time, trying to improve somebody else's life. And that person may not even give a damn, because they're so deep into their addiction, and I mean, when I say addiction, it could be sex addiction, not just substance abuse. And they're just like, they might be doing better than you. I was reading something about codependency, and they said that sometimes the codependent is sicker than the addict, because they have put their life aside, and they may have had a viable life to try and, save somebody from themselves. And that person may even be pissed off at them for trying to do that, because they don't want to stop what they're doing. So these things have to be looked at, but there are some positive qualities. I don't want to just make it like that. But I want to say one more thing, because they mention here that your nature is impractical, and it's not just in terms of love, but in terms of your relationship to money. And this is because, and they mention possessions too, which is part of the Venus influence. And I did a video on Neptune in the second house, and that could be indicative of this as well. If you identify specifically with how you handle money, or your relationship with money, how you regard money is probably the best way of putting it. Because if you had Saturn in the second house, you would be very disciplined when it comes to money. You would probably be very frugal, and that might be a polite way of saying, very cheap and stingy, stingy, not giving to others, but not even giving to yourself. And being very oriented towards saving the future. Saturn is about old age. Well, Neptune is this idealism. And in that video where I had Neptune in the second house, I had a thumbnail of Buddhist monks with their begging bowl, because that was how I envisioned it. And you see this also with not so much Protestants, but Catholics, the monks and nuns, where they take a vow of poverty. I don't know if they're doing that these days, probably, because they're not working outside of the church, but I don't know how that works. But, they would do that. Now, why would they do that? You could be cynical and say, well, they're kind of like the fundraisers for the church. But the other thing that is going on is that it trains them to rely on the universe in the form of humanity, of course. It's not pennies from heaven, but just like people that are contributing, but it's like you don't know what you're going to get. And you rely on that for your sustenance That would be more, I think, the Buddhist monks, but in the case of the Catholic Church, they are feeding and clothing or housing their religious clergy, whatever you want to call them. And the thing is, it causes you to rely on something greater than just a mundane job, because a lot of people give away their power to their job, or even if they have their own business, they're like, oh my God, I lost my job, or with the business, I didn't make as much this month as I made last month. What am I going to do? And they're totally reliant on that instead of opening themselves up to relying on the universe to provide for them. I remember, I don't know if this was a New Age saying or what, but something like that. Somebody said the universe owes me a living. That's like an affirmation you can say, and I actually like that. I'm sure a lot of people would be horrified, but it's really the universe owing you a living, not any individual out here or entity, but the universe, because God put us here. So that means that God must take care of us, if we really are in alignment with that concept. If somebody rejects that concept and they say, no, I have to take care of myself, well, okay, maybe they create that reality. I don't know. I don't know if it's that literal, but I do think that there is some truth to that. And you may feel that way. You may be like a little bit confused when it comes to your money. Maybe you don't have a good sense of what things are worth, or gullible in terms of somebody coming along and selling you something. I remember, I haven't watched television in my home in over 14 years. So I've only seen it when I've been out, and that's very occasionally. But back in the day when I used to watch television, I used to remember those late night infomercials. And that was before ASMR, and they were so soothing because it was like just listening to people talk about how this product is going to change somebody's life. And this is what somebody with this combination might think, is that if somebody sells them some kind of product, and it could be some crazy ass product, you might, and they tell you that it's going to be a game changer for you, you love that sense of fantasy or illusion, even if a part of you kind of suspects that. For those of you who are of the millennial generation, I think it's the millennials that have Neptune in Capricorn. And you also have Venus in Capricorn, although it doesn't have to be in the same sign necessarily. But you have this conjunction. You may be a little bit more savvy, but you still may love to have this part of yourself that believes that there is this product that's going to change your life. Or you might be that person who you might even have the sun in Capricorn, and you do have this kind of weird relationship with money. And anybody who knows astrology, who knows you, might say, how come you seem to never know what you have in the bank, or even if you have any money in the bank, and how come you bought these things, you got scammed out of money because you believed that ridiculous story that person told you, that hard luck story, and that could be why. And you might be like, you hear all these things about being a Capricorn or something like that, and you think to yourself, this doesn't sound like me at all. and that could be why. That's one of the reasons why astrology is so hard to just pin down to the archetypes that they are talking about, because we have so much variation in these other influences and how they impact things. So yeah, that could be that sense of not being grounded when it comes to these kinds of issues. And like I said, can also be with love, can be something that impacts your life in a challenging way. In terms of anything with artistic creations, you are very moved on an emotional level by that. And I would say not just emotionally affected, but I feel like even like spiritually inspired. Now, one of the things that, talking about love and fantasy, they mention here this idea of the person who, because you might have this aura that is ethereal, that you have this tendency to kind of make love something that is not necessarily tangible. And I think that, and that's because you want to keep it in that magical realm. And that's one of the things that can actually lead in certain circumstances to not even participating in it. And if you have Venus, I have to be careful when I say this, because to have a conjunction, it usually will be in the same sign. And because Neptune is a generational planet, we currently are in the Pisces transit of Neptune being in Pisces, and it will go into Aries and start a whole new cycle in probably 2 years or so. I think it's 2025. I'm not 100% on that. But so it can't be in certain signs in our lifetime. Like I can't use the example of Neptune in Aries, for instance. And I think I was going to use Neptune in Gemini. So somebody pointed that out, because I did do that before. And I had to laugh because I was like, yeah, that's true. Because the person said, well, you would have to be like 225 years old or something to have that. So, well, we could just say like Neptune and Sagittarius, and you maybe have Venus and Sag and Neptune and Sag, and Sag is really freedom loving. So that's, already giving the person perhaps in some ways a reluctance to settle down, because love may be to you more of a playful thing and not something that you want to just have be heavy, like maybe sometimes Venus and Scorpio or whatnot. And yet, and then this exacerbates that, because you have this magical concept of what love is that might be overly idealistic. And so in order to preserve the illusion, you kind of stay at arm's length. So yeah, that's something that I could totally see. Now, you may be obsessed with the idea of a soulmate. They didn't say anything about, they used the word yearning, but I could see somebody in certain circumstances that might feel like, especially if you are highly intuitive and you actually dream about your soulmate. I believe that I have had at least one client with my personal readings that, has seen, sometimes people dream about their soulmates and things like that. And these kinds of, and they know what that person looks like, but they feel like when is he or she going to get here? And I can't relate to that because I've never had that happen, but I could see how that would be a little bit frustrating But then you couple that with this highly romantic nature where it is, I was going to say bordering on mystical, but it's downright mystical with that, the conjunction happening to be with the planet Neptune. And you could be feeling it very, very deeply. And because these days we are elevating ourselves, our vibration is rising, the planet's vibration is rising. The spiritual is becoming more and more mainstream. I have seen it just within the past, let's say, 12 years or so. It's like actually fairly mind blowing. And it's like, par for the course, talking about 5D or talking about, well, ascension, that's old hat, but talking about jumping timelines or all of these things, it's not something that everyone has never heard of or most people have never heard of. It's something that a lot of people may have at least, been exposed to. So it's like the time is ripe for this. And so I'm not saying that this is pie in the sky or delusional, but like everything else, it can be something that is elevated, and sometimes it can be something that is diluted because the person wants it so badly, but they're not seeing the truth of the matter. They're blinded by their own, I was going to say insecurities, because they may be, in some cases, they may be so hungry for love that they're settling for less, and they're trying to make this person who doesn't measure up as a life partner into something that they cannot be at this time. Not that they never will be, but at this time, they just don't have what it takes because their life is not together. So it can be, a bit challenging at times if you're dealing with that sort of thing. You may recoil at people who are acting ratchet or what we would say coarse, coarse behavior. It actually reminds me of like the sign Libra, because I know they're like that. Sometimes I see a similarity with Libra and Pisces. And I'm saying Pisces because we're talking about Neptune here. And you definitely are very sensitive. So it's important to honor that. Don't, if you're somebody who kind of like, I use the example of Sagittarius because it's a fire sign and it tends to be very boisterous and maybe sometimes cocky because of the fire element. Not, it's a masculine sign, so it has a lot of that assertive or aggressive energy behind it. And you might not realize how sensitive you are with this combination, especially in love, I would say. But you have to honor that because it might take you by surprise. But like I said, you may be turned off by people who are rude to others, even environments, situations that are not high vibrational. And so the bottom line is you have to vet people very carefully that you allow into your heart, because you might be an easy mark or soft touch for people who are troubled and who, and I use the word troubled and I see they use that same word, and they also said needy, which is that should be a big red flag when somebody acts like they need to be filled, like they have an empty cup emotionally. Such a person is not coming from a place of a lot of autonomy. They're coming from a place of dependency. And they may give you a sob story that has to do with their life, and it might be 100% accurate, but if they've chosen to identify as a victim, they can be quite manipulative to try to garner sympathy from others so that in the quest for love, but it's a distorted quest. And if you get mixed up with such a person, it can be very hard for you to kind of disentangle from them because you may fully believe that you are responsible for their happiness. So be careful about that. And likewise, on the monetary level, if you are somebody who is generous, for instance, and you attract a taker, be careful because you may feel like you're doing the right thing and actually you're just being taken for a ride. Okay, well, I hope that you enjoyed this. And if you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.